So this is your complete guide, the complete beginner's guide, whatever you want to call it, to the Garmin Forerunner 970. I've been using it over the last little while, putting it through its paces across all sorts of different workouts, all to give you the tips and tricks that you need to use this watch to its fullest extent. However, this is not a review. I've got a separate, complete new details and review video up in the corner there, where I dive into things like accuracy and everything like that. This is all about explaining how to use this watch and which pieces work well and which pieces you might need some tips to get around.
And just a quick note, this video is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. More about them a little later on.
So without just simply dive into it, this is a Forerunner 970. On the back here, you've got that Gen 5 optical heart rate sensor that enables things like ECG and skin temperature. Otherwise though, it's got a touchscreen color AMOLED display. You've got 2 buttons on the right and then 3 buttons on the left. Like all or most all Garmin watches, you can use either buttons or touch to get to the menus. So for example, I could swipe down using just my finger on touch, or I could press back right there and go ahead and use the buttons to go down as well. You can choose whether you want that in the normal modes or you want that in just the sport modes, and we'll get into that in just a second. We're going to start off though with some of the basics in terms of the watch face and the widgets, then we'll get into some of the sports stuff. We're just going to kind of dive deeper and deeper and deeper, going from the easy stuff into the more complex stuff, eventually ending with music and payments. So with that, this is your watch face right there. You can customize the watch face from stock watch faces, or you can download watch faces from Garmin's Connect IQ app store. A lot of those watch faces are free, a couple of them cost money, but the vast majority of those are free, and you get as data geekery as you want or as simplistic as you want. Also in that Connect IQ app is the ability to customize your watch face. If you want to put something like a picture on there, etc., you can do that. You can also just hold the middle left-hand button right there, go to watch face, and then choose from some of the different stock options that are here. I can choose add new watch face, and then go down to this list, and these are all the stock ones that are on the watch itself. And then once you choose one, we'll just choose this random one right there. You can go ahead and customize by tapping this upper right hand button. You choose data, and then you can change all the different data metrics that you see there. Do you see as I highlight this, I choose different ones. I can say, you know what, instead of recovery time, I want to have it be steps or stress or sunrise, sunset, etc., all the way down through. Now, I like the default watch face, so I'm just going to cancel out of this, keep on going back here, back, and we're back to the default watch face. But you can see this one has data here, 1, 2, 3, 4 different pieces, plus the date and time battery up there that you can customize as you see fit. Now, going on down from that, you have the widget glances. These are basically small glanceable bits of information that then open up into the full widget. So if we go down, for example, to the steps one, so I'm going to go way down through my widgets here, keep on going down. Here we go, steps. I can tap that open, and you can see my steps for the day. So here's a 5K run I did this morning. Here's walking to lunch. And I go down one more time, and I can see the number of steps each day. Yesterday, I did a 50K run, so there's a lot of steps on that day. But go on down there, there's my distance average per day. Now, all this information is also on the Garmin Connect app on your smartphone or on Garmin Connect on the web. In fact, now's a good time to mention that absolutely nothing I'm going to show you in this entire thing will require Garmin Connect Plus. That's their paid subscription, roughly I think about 70 or so bucks a year. I don't think it's worth it. There's not any meaningful, valuable features in that. Thus, I'm not going to show you anything from that. I've got like a separate video in the corner if you want to watch on that, but right now it's pretty thin in terms of the features that they give you for what you pay. Going on back though, again, these widget glances, you can order them as you see fit. For example, I can long hold right here and choose to reorder the glance, remove the glance, add a glance. I can create folders, so I can put, all my training ones in one folder, all my daily stuff in another folder, and you can have third-party ones in here as well. So I'm going to reorder this steps one up towards the top where it might be a little more easily found. I'll put it right underneath Hill Score right there, and if I go back, you'll see now it's under Hill Score. And as I mentioned, there's 5 buttons here. Generally speaking, upper right-hand button is the confirmation button, like the OK button. Lower right-hand button is your back or escape button. Up here is up and down. And then this up there at the top, left-hand top left button is both your light as well as controls menu. So you can long hold this for a second to open up the controls menu. This is where you can lock the device screen if you want to. You can customize all these, open up the flashlight, broadcast heart rate, power it off, and all sorts of kind of quick controls. Now, some of the other basics that you're going to want to know about on the watch is you can swipe down from the top to see any notifications you have. Right now, I've cleared them all out, but this would be like smartphone notifications, etc. Now, depending on which phone platform you're on, you can respond to notifications or not. In the case of iOS users, so those on the Apple ecosystem, You cannot respond to notifications due to limitation from Apple and iOS. They restrict that. Versus if you're on Android, you can respond to text notifications. However, on both platforms, you can do things like clear the notifications and at least confirm that they're there. So if I clear a notification from my watch, it will indeed clear from my phone as well. So you don't necessarily have to go back to the phone to clear the notification. Meanwhile, going back into the settings here, there are the new focus modes. So if we go on down here to watch settings, you'll see down there focus modes. So focus modes are relatively similar to what you have in your phone for sleeping and activity and other focus modes that you can create. This is something Garmin introduced on the Fenix 8 last summer. I would say it's not fully baked yet. It's kind of like the initial startings of those features. But you can choose, for example, while you're doing a workout, that these are the different settings that will be set. So voice alerts, you can say, you know what, I want to have voice alerts off. Here's the voice alert configurations, etc. You can go down to notifications and alerts. You can change all these alerts. So the idea being that you can change a bunch of the different things that happen on the watch depending on the focus modes that you're in. Now, those focus modes are then driven by whether or not you're in a workout for activity or sleep when you set the sleep settings up. Now, in terms of that setup, you'll do the sleeping bit on your phone while you're setting it up. And what that does, it basically tells it what time it's going to go into a sleep mode. And now if you hold the controls menu up here, you can see there is a sleep mode on or off. Now, this mode does not start tracking of your sleep. It just simply puts the watch into kind of a dim state. So you'll see the sleep tracking is not affected there. But you'll see it's now basically in a simplified dim state. That way, while you're sleeping, it's not like this super bright screen. This is something introduced a few years ago on other AMOLED screens, and you can always go ahead and tap it to see this. And in darker conditions, this will seem nice and dark, so it's not something that's going to light up, in front of your face on the pillow or something like that. We can go ahead and turn this off though for now. Turn off the sleep mode and get back to the main screen there. Now let's talk about that sleep tracking. So we go on down from there. I'm going to find that sleep tracking option. Here we go, or sleep tracking score. This is my sleep from last night. Now it's going to automatically track your sleep no matter what. So basically, when you fall asleep, it's going to track your sleep. In my testing, it's pretty accurate that for the most part. And the same is true of naps. If you were to go ahead and just lay down right now in the middle of the afternoon, it'll track that nap. However, I do find that it does a much better job when you're actually laying down to track a nap versus sitting up in a chair. Doesn't seem to track as well for me for whatever reason. I'm not talking like a wooden chair, but like a couch or something like that. If you're sitting up, it doesn't seem to do as well. In any case, here are your sleep stats right there. I can see my duration, the time I went to sleep, the time I woke up, and these are different sleep stages and sleep phases. And there's no breathing variation data. I didn't have pulse ox enabled last night. So pulse ox is your blood oxygenation levels. And by default, that is not enabled. And the reason is that the battery burns the crap out of stuff. You can enable it if you want to. And this new breathing variation data is sort of roughly like a non-medical version of sleep apnea. Garmin can't call it sleep apnea tracking, or basically their breathing variation tracking, because that would go ahead and run afoul FDA things. But they can call it breathing variation data as opposed to sleep apnea tracking. Going down, you can see my sleep stages over the last little while. As I always say, I don't put too much stock in sleep stage or sleep phase data across the board. Even like so-called medical grade devices that do this are only like in the mid 80 percentile accurate. So when it comes to a wearable, even if it was like in the mid 70s or so, a really good wearable, it's still not super accurate in the grand scheme of things. Now going on back from here, I'm gonna go up and find my HRV status. HRV status is heart rate variability. And so what this is doing is looking at basically the timing of in between your heartbeats and how that changes over time. And over the last few years, companies have started to really dive a lot more into this data for both sport usage as well as just kind of day-to-day health tracking. Some of that is probably overdone, but I think at a very basic level, this does a good job of stuff. So HRV tracking on a Garmin wearable is going to track your HRV values the entire night long and give you a very simple average. So if I go down right there, you can see my HRV values over the course of the night. And generally speaking, you'll see those values improve, in my case, increase in value by the end of the night. Now, don't focus too much on the exact values here. Every single person is different. My wife's values tend to be much higher than mine, and one of my friends tends to be much, much lower than mine, yet we all survive every day just fine. Now, within that, you can see my 7-day average and how that shifts over time. But more interesting than that is this HRV value over time. This green tunnel is sort of my norms. And you can see I've gone a little bit higher than that, a little bit lower than that. For me, generally speaking, the lower I go, that means the more fatigued I am. Maybe I'm getting sick or something like that. And then the higher it is, the more I'm recovered. That said, some people, a small portion of the population, are flipped, where basically the higher values are worse and the lower values are better. But most people tend to be low is worse and higher is better. But again, where you are in that scale can vary. There are some people I know that their norm is like 100 milliseconds versus my norm is 49 to 63 milliseconds. Note it will take 19 nights worth of sleep when you first get a Garmin watch, any Garmin watch, to get this data built up. And then from there on out, it'll maintain that even if you switch Garmin watches. And you can see that green tunnel there is essentially that norm. And then within that, if you look right there, it shows balanced because I am in that green range of my norm versus I went a little bit higher than that. It might be unbalanced and the down lower, unbalanced, and then red would be bad news bears. And so generally speaking, if I'm in the red down there, like that's when I'm really, really sick. Like the last time I was in the red was a few years ago with COVID, and that was not a good time. So in my case, I'm pretty much happy anywhere in that green range. Now, one of the things that you're going to see when you wake up each day is the morning report. It's one of Garmin's most popular features out there. It was introduced a few years ago. And so the very first thing you're going to see is the morning report. You can see this right here. And it's going to kind of recap your sleep from last night. It's going to also tell you what's coming up on the day ahead in terms of any workouts you have scheduled, as well as the weather, any meetings, all that kind of stuff is going to be in there. You can customize the morning report though by just middle left-hand button again right there, going on down to watch settings, and then going on to notifications and alerts, report settings. There's the morning report option, and then I can edit the report and I can customize which components I want shown in that. I can add a few more to that as well. There you go. I like mine kind of the way it is. Now, in addition to the morning report, as part of the Forerunner 970, the new feature here is the evening report. It takes the exact same concept as the morning report and basically kind of mixes it up again and does a recap of your day and then tells you what to expect tomorrow. Pretty much as simple as that. It also gives you the sleep coach information for that night up ahead here. And it's going to show this 90 minutes before your scheduled bedtime as you have it defined on the watch. And it's just a recap of the day. And just like the morning report, this won't go away until you dismiss it. But of course, also like the morning report, you can turn it off entirely if you want to, or you can customize it. So you can see here, it should show me body battery, workouts, weather, jet lag advisor, tomorrow's event, if there is an event, sleep coach, and I can add other components to that as well. Now, this is different than the daily summary feature, which has been on various Garmin watches over the last year and a half or so. That feature I found to be mostly pretty much entirely useless, but this is much, much better and is much more useful because it's the morning report, which people love, but just simply inverted for the nighttime. Now, the other thing that you're going to get at night is skin temperature tracking. You can see that right here on my sleep data. You'll see this on the Garmin Connect app itself, but not anywhere on the watch. And it's just looking for skin temperature variation to your norm. It establishes a baseline, just like HRV tracking, and then it goes ahead and tells you whether or not you're off from that norm. In the case of Garmin, they're only using that data for ovulation cycle prediction, and really only starting with the Forerunner 970. Other companies are doing a little more than that as well, but Garmin's kind of keeping it rather simplistic, so it's not something I'd really focus on at this point in time. The other feature that also comes with that new optical heart rate sensor on the back, the Gen 5 optical heart rate sensor, is the ECG capability. That is a medical grade ECG capability that is medically certified. And note that when it comes to accuracy, the way that works is much, much different than taking your heart rate on your wrist. In the case of the ECG sensor, it's really looking at the electrical signals. So there's the basically metallic pads that you have right there. There's this bezel right here that also has essentially metal in it and a wire connected to it. So it's quite a bit different than the optical heart rate sensor doing heart rate from this. So it's, again, a very different thing there. This is medically certified versus normal heart rate during sport from the watch is very much not medically certified. In any case, to get that set up, you need to go through the Garmin Connect onboarding process. It takes just a couple seconds. It explains how it works. It explains the fact that it does not detect a heart attack. It explains that about 10 times over, just so you're really clear on that. And that is all required by the FDA as well as the EU authorities in most other countries as well. And then it has you do a quick test run on your wrist so you understand how it works. At that point, from there on forward, you can do an ECG whenever you'd like. And you can also export that ECG to your doctor. And the main thing that a Garmin watch does is AFib detection as part of that ECG. And it's only doing it mainly when you do that ECG then, as opposed to doing it as a background process like some other companies such as Apple and Google, and I think even Samsung as well, are doing it as background processes 24/7. In the case of the Forerunner 970, it now has a flashlight flashlight, just like the Phoenix and Instinct series do. You can tap this upper left-hand button right there, and you can see when I double tap that turns the flashlight on, and also allows me to change and adjust it with this little toggle right there. So there's one red option, and then there's 4 brightness levels of the white option there. I generally keep it on the red option for usage at night in hotels, unfamiliar spaces, things like that, versus the white light is best when you need to go ahead and just like really find something underneath the couch or something like that. Brightness level, it's roughly the same amount of brightness as your phone's flashlight, but just nice and easy on your wrist and easy to kind of have it on your wrist as you're doing something and look where you're going.
Now what's cool is the flashlight also has the option to automatically turn on into a strobe while you're running after sunset. You can configure that in the settings, and of course you can use it for more practical things like finding your way through the woods. Speaking of practical, along with this watch flashlight is the sponsor of today's video, Precision Fuel and Hydration. I use Precision products for all of my training and racing, as does my wife. In fact, I even used it on that 50K workout as well. But it's not just me and my wife using it, but also NBA teams, NFL teams, Major League Baseball teams, and of course pro cycling teams, pro triathletes, including the Tour de France teams, both the men's and the women's side. But one of the coolest things about Precision Fuel and Hydration is they have a team of sports scientists that can help you plan out your race fueling strategy. So you can have a 20-minute Zoom call with them, basically walk through your race goals, and then they can help you figure out what products fit best into those particular race goals. And of course, one of the most important things when it comes to fueling and endurance sports is a product that's actually edible. Their CEO once noted to me that their products are inoffensive, is the best way to describe them. Meaning when you're 8, 10, 12 hours into a long event, it's not a big deal to consume those, versus some of the products out there today are just super sweet or don't taste right. I've had no problems on very, very long adventures taking in Precision Fuel gels as well as their drink mixes. Definitely good stuff there. Anyways, you can save 15% on your first order using the coupon code on the screen right there. Thanks again to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring this video.
Okay, now before we get into the sports side of things, I want to briefly talk about the display. However, I will note that if you're finding this video interesting or useful, just watch it all the way through, like a background podcast, if you will. That is the only thing that YouTube cares about. It really helps out this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, when it comes to the AMOLED display here, there's basically 2 core options. There's always on display and there's gesture-based display. Gesture-based display means that when my wrist is down like this display would be entirely off. The screen would be black, just like the screen here on the table. And then I raise my wrist up, it goes to full brightness like you saw right there. However, always on display, it means that my wrist is down like this. It goes ahead in its dim state. You can kind of see if I tilt it towards the camera, it's a bit of a dim state. And then as I rotate up, it goes to full brightness. That's how I keep my watch in the always on configuration. However, there's also skin detection sensors on this. So right now it's on the table and it goes, I don't need to waste battery being in any sort of state. I'm just going to turn off the display and I can simply tap it to turn it back on again. You can configure these options in the display menu. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold the left-hand middle button there to get the settings. We'll go to watch settings. We will go down to display and brightness. And then right there, always on display. By default, it's in gesture based, meaning this is off. And I just simply toggled it to always on display. As part of the setup process for your watch, there's also the large font size option, so you can change the text size. Right now I've got for the default, but you can increase this if you want to make the text size bigger across the board, or decrease it if you want it much, much smaller. In my case, I just like the default. It's pretty much perfect for me, but that is an option. There's also the option for so-called redshift. So at night, you can basically turn redshift on, and it goes into this kind of red-only setting, just like that right there, where everything's in a red state that may be better for your eyes at night. And that way you would do that is to go to the after sunset option as opposed to just on or off. In my case, I'm going to keep it off. I don't really like it that much. So the one more thing I want to talk about before we get to sports, which is the talking from the speaker. So the 970 has a speaker in it as opposed to a beeper. So for example, the Forerunner 965 has a beeper, so it makes little chirps and whatnot, but it can't speak words, versus this can speak words. It can also connect to your voice assistant. So if you're on an Apple phone, it'll use Apple Siri. If you're on a Google phone or an Android phone of some sort, it'll use Google Assistant. And if you're on a Samsung phone, you have the option to use Bixby. Now, in my case, I've configured the voice assistant to be to the upper right-hand button. And the way I've done that is, again, back into settings, and I go down into watch settings, and all the way down, I go up this way, so you can kind of go inverted if you want to. System, shortcuts, and then the hold start button I set as phone assistant. And this is where you can set different shortcuts if you want to, that you can say, hey, hold back, hold down, hold different combinations, does different things. But I went ahead and I set this top one here to phone assistant. So I'm just going to skate back real quick. There we go. I hold the upper right hand button. This will now connect to my phone to leverage, and then I can go ahead and ask this thing questions. What is the weather today?
Looks like it will be partly cloudy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 62 degrees, with overnight lows around 49.
In addition, you can also use the phone features to make calls, again, as long as your phone is nearby. This does not have cellular in it, so it's going to depend on your phone. My phone is right there in front of me, so it's using Bluetooth to make that connection. So in this case, I'm going to press the upper right-hand button, and I will go down to the phone option right there. And then within this, I can choose from my contacts, or I can choose from the dialer. So if it was like 1994 and I remember people's phone numbers, I can go ahead and do it this way. Or I can just go into the contacts right there and see the different contacts I have and dial them this way. So I can choose my wife, and then I can go ahead and dial her right there. Now it's going to use the speaker and the microphone from the watch as opposed to from my phone. And overall, the speaker and microphone seems better here than it was on the Fenix 8 or the Venue 3 before it, but it's all essentially the same features. Note that the Forerunner 970 though does not have the voice notes feature that is on the Fenix 8 that allows you to create quick voice notes, but otherwise it has kind of the core functionality we've seen in the past from Garmin's voice features. So at this point, let's dive into the sports section. We'll show off the kind of the basics around the different sport modes, and then we'll get into more and more complex things over time. So the way you access the sport modes is tapping the upper right-hand button right there, and then these are the different sport modes. So on the top are the ones that you favorited. So I can go over here into activities, and then see additional sport modes right there that I preferred. And if I go down far enough, I can choose to edit them if I want to. I can add sport modes, and there are tons of different sport modes in here. I will put a quick listing of all the sport modes on the bottom there, but you can see there's been about 15 new sport modes included in the Forerunner 970 compared to the 965. There was a time where Garmin used to add more sport modes to older watches, but now they just make you buy new watches instead, which is a good time to point out this video is definitely not sponsored by Garmin. I just say it like it is. I'm going to tell you the good and the bad of things that do and don't work very well. Now, a lot of these sport modes have kind of unique features that are unique to that particular sport mode from a data standpoint. So for example, if we were to look at something like skiing, this will actually track your ski runs. It knows when you're on the ski lift, it knows when you're going down this hill, and it tracks your top speed per run. It gives you individual run times and shows you that those are ski runs as opposed to just this generic gigantic GPS activity. In the case of open water swimming, it has your stroke rate as you're going through the water. Those are things that Garmin has historically done unique data for each individual sport profile. However, there are some new profiles, in fact, a lot of the new ones here, where they're less focused on tracking something unique for that particular sport profile and more about categorization. So that after the fact, you can go and say this was time spent playing soccer, football, this was time spent playing basketball, etc. But it's not tracking your shots in basketball, for example. It's not tracking your shots on goal in soccer or football. That's more about categorization. In any case, going on back here, let's go back to the very beginning. I'm going to go over to Run. There we go. And open this up. Within Run, this is kind of a very similar user interface that we saw on the Fenix 8 introduced there. And go down, I can open up structured workouts under training. So these are workouts that either created by Garmin's daily suggested workout feature, one's pushed from their Garmin coach, one's pushed from third-party platforms like Training Peaks, etc., and one's even created by yourself on Garmin Connect. Those are all options there. If I look at the workout library, here's today's training. I can crack that open. And these are workouts that it's created for me. So I went ahead and I put a triathlon race on my calendar for the fall, and it's gone ahead and generated swim, bike, and run workouts. You can do the exact same thing for a running race or a cycling event, and it'll dynamically add and change those workouts depending on what you're doing. So for example, as I mentioned earlier on, yesterday I did a 50K run. That wasn't on my calendar. I just went out and did a 50K run in a banana suit with someone that's going around the entire Netherlands to pick up trash. Super cool project there, but that wasn't on my calendar, and Garmin was not expecting me to do that. It was expecting me to do, I think it was like a 35 or 40-minute run and a swim. So what it did today, though, is it said, you know, yesterday seemed to be kind of spicy, thus you're just going to have a rest day today. And then tomorrow it's on track for more workouts again. But if it gets through today and goes, you know what, you're still not recovered, your sleep is bad, or you look like you're still strained, it'll adjust that as well. And this is true of running, cycling, or triathlon. And the way this works is you can add a race to your calendar using Garmin Connect, like you see right here. You can even search for races nearby, and it'll go ahead and basically build that entire schedule towards that goal, automatically adjusting it as I mentioned. Now going on back here, you can also navigate a course. We'll talk about navigation a little later on, and you can change your run settings right here. This is where you can change your data screens. So these are my data screens that I have. And I can change any one of these by tapping this little icon up in the corner here, or I go all the way down to the bottom. There we go, boop, and add a new one, a new custom data page, heart rate zone, running profile, sorry, running power, and different pages right here. These are all kind of like standard pages. So if I do custom data, I can choose how many data fields I want on that page. So you can see this right there, iterating through this all the way down to the bottom. And I can have, these 8 different data pages there, data fields, sorry. And I can choose which field I want. And then I go into all the different fields that I can assign to that particular page there. And again, you can customize these not only on the watch, but also on Garmin Connect as well. It's been there now for a few years. So if you don't want to, futz through all these different settings here, just go into Garmin Connect into the devices and then choose your device. And then you can set up all your data fields on a per sport profile basis. Keeping in mind that all of this right here is just for this one sport profile. You can do this for every single sport profile. You can dive into things like your AutoLap settings and so on. There's a gazillion settings in here that you can tweak based on what you want. You may want one thing for regular running and one thing for track running, and a different thing for trail running and ultra running and so on down the list. Now, one of the settings to be aware of briefly in run settings here is your GPS mode. So if I go down right here, all the way down to the very, very bottom, you can see satellites. And by default, it's in so-called auto select mode right there. And that's what I use like 99.99% of the time. This morning, I was doing a bit of a GPS test in a super high building area, and I really wanted to force it into multi-band so I could see how that worked there. Otherwise, I keep an auto select. And what auto select does, it'll dynamically change between these higher battery consuming modes like all plus multi-band, which is super, super accurate, but also overkill if you're out in like farmland with nothing around. That's just burning battery for the fun of it, when it can go all the way down to something like GPS only, and that's still super accurate out in empty farmland, but burns like half the battery. So what auto select does is it's second by second looking at how much it needs from a GPS standpoint based on your environment. If it's got interference, etc., it'll scale it up to be a higher battery burning but more accurate setting, and if it's got nothing around, it'll scale it back down again. And again, my testing, that's been very, very accurate to use across the board. Generally just keep it on its default of auto select. Note that ultra track, however, down there is not ultra accurate. It's actually the least accurate option here is for ultra long battery consumption. But I would say this really isn't the best watch for that. If you're looking at that sort of thing, look at the Phoenix series, but in particular the Enduro 3, that's really like their going the distance watch. I would really only use ultra track if you're in an absolute pinch, and this is like your one thing a year where you just need to get this a little bit longer, then you might want to use that. But frankly, even in that scenario, I would go ahead and use probably GPS only instead down there, and then just charge it that night. GPS only will get you, more than 24 hours of battery life, so that's not a problem in that particular mode. Here's all the battery life modes down the bottom there, just in case you're wondering. So just up from that setting is the broadcast heart rate option. This is super useful, primarily like for indoor cycling standpoints, for example, on a Peloton bike, etc., where you want to broadcast your heart rate from your watch to the Peloton bike or other app, Zwift, etc. And you have two kind of core options. One, you can do it right here, but you can also do it via the controls menu, where you just long hold up here, and you go into the heart rate broadcasting option, and that just simply broadcasts your heart rate right then and there across both ANT Plus and Bluetooth Smart once I tap this on. And this doesn't record an activity versus the other one records an activity. Generally speaking, I would recommend that you record an activity because that way Garmin will go ahead and include it in your training load metrics and all that kind of goodness we'll talk about in just a second, versus right here, it's not going to see that as a workout, so it won't see it as a training effort. It'll see it like from a intensity minutes, etc. standpoint, but not from a actual workout standpoint. So it's best to dual record those. Now, I do want to mention that you can go ahead and pair sensors, both ANT Plus and Bluetooth Smart. You simply go down to Watch Settings, you go into Connectivity, then Sensors and Accessories, and tap Add New. From there, you'll see the list of sensors that you can pair, connecting my heart rate monitor right there, the battery's low, but otherwise, these are the exact same sensor types that you've seen in the past with the Garmin Forerunner 965. You can pair multiple sensors of the same type if you want to, have multiple heart rate monitors here paired, as well as multiple power meters. There's no issues with that at all. Now, going on back here, back to the run settings. Once you're ready to go, you just tap this upper right hand button and it starts the run. You'll then see the data fields and data pages as you've configured them, like you see right here on the screen, and you can iterate through those by just pressing down to see the different data pages that you've configured there. You also probably just saw the live track in my case started automatically. I've configured live track on my phone to automatically start, and also I toggled a button to automatically include the course information as well. That email then gets sent to my wife and a couple friends, so at least someone knows where I am at all times. Keeping in mind, you do have to have your phone with you. Still, it's a super handy feature, and again, that feature is totally free. Where it costs money is if you want them to get a text message as opposed to an email. But otherwise, it's totally free and has been for like 15 years or something like that. When you're done with the workout, you tap the upper right hand button to stop it. This is also how you can pause if you need to go for an ice cream break or something like that. And then you just simply tap save right there. You can also use resume later. That's if you're doing a multi-day trek and you want it as one big GPS activity. So I would generally recommend to simply split those up into day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. And if you do want one big activity, you can use various tools like FitFile tools, etc. FitFileTools.com, I think it is, to go ahead and squish those all together into one big file. The reason is there's lots of quirky things in the Garmin ecosystem that don't work as well when you have it as one big activity, because a lot of the training load parameters will see that and assign that training load to the last day of the activity as opposed to the individual days. So in most cases, just simply hit save at the end of your day. But resume later is useful if you're going for a lunch break or something like that. You just want to have it there and resume that later on. In any case, we'll see these summaries as you see right here on the screen on the watch itself, and then you can see the same thing on Garmin Connect as well. And then finally, all of this is synced off to Strava and other platforms as you've configured. So Strava, Training Peaks, I mean, a gazillion platforms out there. Now, one of the new running features on the Forerunner 970 that'll be also coming to other newer Garmin watches, the Fenix 8 series, the Enduro 3, but not the 965 and not the Fenix 7 Pro, etc., is running tolerance. What this is looking at is essentially what the name implies. What is your current tolerance in terms of the distance per week that you have? So right now, my current load for this week is 71.5 kilometers, but my tolerance, what it thinks I should be doing maximum per week, is 31 kilometers a week. And my actual 7-day load right now is 74.8. So certainly yesterday's 51 kilometer run is contributing a lot to this, and a lot to that color being orange as opposed to purple. Purple is like good and happy, orange is you're overshooting a bit. Now you can see this down below. If I tap once, you see my training weeks, you can see the impact load and the tolerance. And so right now this block for this week is way higher than my norm. And that's mostly because I've been doing a lot of cycling lately as opposed to running. So I've been running like 30 to 40 kilometers a week, but then cycling a crap ton more, and then open water swimming as well. I kind of go in like phases throughout the year when I'm running a lot more or cycling a lot more, or just happens to be a bike heavy time of the year. Now, there's another new feature in the Forerunner 970 related to running, which is the step speed loss feature. That feature requires a new HRM 600 heart rate strap. That's the $170 heart rate strap to replace the HRM Pro Series strap, and it adds this new metric that is essentially looking at how much loss you have every time your foot strikes the ground. So you imagine if you're running down like a steep embankment, you're going to have a lot more losses than a nice flat section of terrain that's pavement that you've got a beautiful stride on. You'll have less losses and then be more efficient. And so you can see that data on the watch itself. You can see it right here as I'm running along, but you can also see that afterwards in the summary section, as well as seeing that on Garmin Connect. Now, that data feeds into something called running economy. And the running economy metric is looking at how efficient you are from a running standpoint with those step speed losses over time. Again, that in turn requires HRM 600 because that underlying data does. Now, the running economy feature does take a number of runs to show up, somewhere between 5 and 7 runs to show up before you're going to start seeing that data. So I want to talk about 2 more new running features before we get into some of the navigation bits. So going on down right here, I'm going to go all the way down till I find the race, one of the half marathons I stuck on here just for fun this summer. There we go, Palma Half Marathon. And then down below that there, you have my Palma Half Marathon projected time. So right now, that little blue line there is giving me a predicted finish time. So if I were to do this race right this second, it'd be at 1:36:44. But it thinks in the next 21 weeks, it'll get me down to 1:32:33. Now, this is heavily based on things like interval runs and long runs and all sorts of like a varied diet of runs. My runs the last few weeks have not been super varied. I had that, 50K yesterday, but otherwise it's been kind kind of random stuff and not a lot of great feeder data. Versus I had some nice steady long runs and I had some really hard interval track runs, it would have better data to work with. So I would say this is probably a bit of a overestimation in terms of being a bit higher than my reality. I suspect I could probably go out and run like a 125, 126 right now is my guess, but this is fair for the moment. The other new running feature is the timing gate functionality. Now this is a bit of a confusingly named feature. What this allows you to do is to create a course for a race. So this is the feature primarily almost entirely for a race. So for yesterday's run, I actually created a course that matched the course that we were doing. I imported it in, and you'll see on the left-hand side of Garmin Connect that there's the option for timing gates. When you toggle that on, you're going to see either miles or kilometers, depending what you want. And now when it's talking timing gates, it's really meaning mile markers on the course. So you imagine you do a big marathon, they've got mile markers there or kilometer markers, depending on where in the world you are. The idea here is that these timing gates, what the rest of the world calls mile markers, will align to the ones in the real world. And that way, when you're running, you'll be able to have your pace be adjusted correctly for the actual course. And so, of course, the reasoning being that when you go out and do a marathon, for example, you are not running 26.2 miles. You are likely going to run somewhere in the 27 to 28 mile range as you weave around people, and you're not running the exact course line as measured, which is measured point to point on the innermost portion of the turn. Like, you're going to run longer. It's virtually impossible to run 26.2 miles. In fact, if you do run 26.2 miles on your watch during a race, your course was short, like factually short. So the idea here, though, is that it'll snap to those mile markers and give you pacing that's appropriate to that. Otherwise, if you're pacing based on GPS watch meandering, you'll probably be disappointed when you get to the finish line and you had kept your goal race pace, but you find yourself short a couple minutes of the finish. So this attempts to adjust for that. So you have your course, you load it up in the watch, it then tells you the timing gate functionality is enabled. So that's going to go ahead and switch your lap markers to be aligned to the theoretical mile markers, timing gates, if you will, on the actual course itself. It will not trigger a lap until you pass that marker or what Garmin believes that marker should be. It's a pretty interesting concept, though a little bit complicated because you do have to have that course imported and you do have to ensure that you load that course up. But once you're out there, it'll show all that pacing automatically. And that gets the final new running feature, which is this adjusted finish line feature. And again, yesterday was a great example of this. I had loaded the course in, which was roughly about a 45 or so kilometer course. However, I had to run a few kilometers afterwards to get to the train station. And we also run a few kilometers to see a windmill and a couple of the distractions along the way. So at the end of the day, I had finished in 51 kilometers. And so when I got to the train station, I hit stop to stop my run. It immediately says, hey, do you want to truncate back to the end of the course? Do you want to adjust your finish line and finish time and everything back to where your course ended back a couple kilometers earlier? Or do you want to keep it the way it is? And again, the idea with this feature is that plenty of people will finish their marathon and then never stop their watch, or they'll stop at like 10 minutes later and look down, or an hour later and they've walked 15 blocks or something away. This will go ahead and say, you know what, no worries, we got you. The finish line was way back there. We're going to truncate this whole portion back to where the finish line was. Now in my case, I wanted those extra kilometers, so I said no thanks. But again, if you were running a marathon and you wanted your actual marathon time and distance, then you would say yes and it would truncate that. So let's look a little bit deeper in one of the sporting features, which is training readiness as well as training status. So if we go on down here, we see training readiness. I've rearranged my different widget glances there because I like training readiness at the top. Training readiness is exactly what it implies, your readiness to train. It's honestly as simple as that, but it has a bunch of different factors underneath it. In this case, my readiness to train is 38, which it defines as low. I'd say it's actually probably more moderate for most scenarios. And this number is going to change throughout the day. When you wake up in the morning, it's going to be one value. And if you do nothing during the day, it'll slowly increase in most cases, versus when you do a workout, it'll decrease. So if I go down right here, I see my factors are sleep, which has been fair, my recovery time, a low need, my HRV status is in balanced state, my acute load is in optimal, my recent sleep score fair, and my stress is in medium. So sleep is relatively straightforward. It's going to look at that and say, what was your sleep last night, for example, and over the last little while. And then your acute load is essentially what is your current training load relative to your norm. This green section here is called the tunnel, or basically your norm, just like it was on the HRV status. So right now my tunnel ranges from, I don't know, like 500 or 600 as the norm on the lower half of that, to 13 or so hundred on the upper half of that. So a pretty broad range because my training over the last 4 to 6 weeks has been kind of all over the place. Some really high weeks and a couple weeks on vacation and so on. So a bit kind of everywhere. And within that, you can see my exercise load over the last 7 days in terms of how it's distributed between anaerobic, high aerobic, and low aerobic. And then down here, my load ratio. Load ratio is simply looking at this week relative to the last 4 weeks in terms of how that compares. So the average last 4 weeks would be 886. By this week, last 7 days, it would be 1054. Thus, right now, my load is 1.1. If they were exactly the same, it'd be 1.0. And if it was, below that considerably, it'd be down to 0 point something. And if it was much, much higher, it'd be in this range over here. One of the things to keep in mind about Garmin's training load, though, is it's heavily skewed towards higher heart rates. So essentially, if I look at my run I did yesterday, that 50K run, just to kind of demonstrate this pretty well. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to find my workouts. There we go, this week right here. And then I'm going to crack open yesterday's 51-kilometer, very easy run. I was picking up trash and stuff like that. It was very, very easy over the course of this entire time. We'll look at the training load for that particular run. We can go down in the list here, go down the very, very bottom. Come on, catch up. This page is always a bit slow to open up. Also, it's like a 7-8 hour activity, so that's probably why. Right here, load 244. Now, that's roughly the same amount of load if I were to throw down a hard 5K, maybe like 6, 7K, but probably in that same range there. You'll see 244 is a relatively low training load value. So even though I was out there for a long time and went a long, long distance, my aerobic side of that, so how hard I was working from a heart and breathing perspective, was relatively low. That's true. It was not a hard effort for me. But the muscular load is much, much higher. And Garmin, generally speaking, does not account for muscular loads. So for example, when I go out for long hikes and I might do 12 to 17 hours at relatively low intensity, but for a long, long time, 50 to 70K, my load will be really similar here to just doing a hard 5K or hardish kind of 10K sort of thing. So just keep that in mind. Now, backing out here, back to this page, training readiness, again, saying, hey, are you ready to train at this point in time? And again, as I mentioned earlier on, this will fluctuate throughout the day. Below that is training status. So training readiness looks at all those daily factors like we talked about, sleep, stress, etc. Versus training status is really much more focused on the training element of that and doesn't really care too much about the other things, with the exception of HRV balance, because that's one of the factors that says, hey, if your HRV balance is tanking, then likely there's something wrong from a fatigue standpoint. So cracking into this a little more, you see those factors again. Here's my Acute load, just like in training readiness. My load focus, right now it's upset that I don't have enough low aerobic load. Yeah, you can't win them all. My VO2 max, and again, these will shift over time depending on the workouts you're doing and how you're responding to those workouts. Right now, it's kind of judging me a bit low on my VO2 max compared to my most recent testing there. My most recent testing has me like in the 57 or so range, but I haven't, again, given it a lot of really good VO2 max workouts to kind of judge and base that on. Below that, we have HRV status, we have recovery time right there, and then heat acclimation. So right now, my training status is maintaining. This is where you would see productive or unproductive. Now, of course, the joke around Garmin stuff is that it's always telling you you're unproductive. And I think that was certainly true a few years ago. But in the last couple of years, they've really kind of broken these things out. And with training status 2.0 introduced in the Phoenix 7 series, generally speaking, if you're seeing unproductive here, you're probably doing it wrong. I mean, it's very, very rare now that I get unproductive unless I'm doing it wrong. And when I say doing it wrong relative to how a coach might judge you. So in that case, every coach has their own methodology on ramping up training rates and things like that. And so if you were to go off and do a training camp and you were to absolutely spike your training load, at some point you would probably get unproductive if those kind of checks and balances of VO2 max and HRV are starting to plummet. Then the coach in Garmin, if you will look at that and go, this isn't healthy for you anymore. Yes, you're getting more load in, but you're increasing your risk of injury and other things like that beyond the norms, well beyond the norms, in fact, to get an unproductive. Again, you have to try really hard to get unproductive on current generation Garmin watches. Okay, backing out to another metric here real quick. We saw the running tolerance earlier. There's endurance score and hill score. These both came in kind of the Phoenix 7 Pro range. Endurance score is looking at basically how much can you absorb from an endurance standpoint. And the core factor that it really cares about here is your heart rate and the duration. and really the repeatability of that. So yesterday's 50K run actually did spike my endurance score. You can see quite a bit there, almost 300 or so odd points, which is quite a bit for endurance score, which doesn't typically move all that much. Yet inversely, this big decline right there of the last 4 weeks is because about 2 weeks of that was on vacation, including on a cruise ship. And while I was doing workouts, I wasn't doing really long workouts. I was doing roughly 40, 60 minutes a day versus my endurance score, which normally has been hanging around 8,000 or so, is dependent on much longer 3 to 4 hour workouts. And in fact, if I tap into that, it's going to tell me exactly that. And so, you can see this, that I should be able to ramp back up pretty quickly here. Now, going on back from that, there's also Hill Score. Hill Score is entirely focused on pedestrian activities. So running and hiking, that's really it, not cycling. So right now I've only got about 1,100 meters of elevation gain over the last 4 weeks, because two plus those weeks were spent, actually 3 of these weeks now have been spent in flat countries. So in the Netherlands, and prior to that, a bit in Florida and some kind of Caribbean territories that were flat. Versus only about a week of that was spent back home in Spain in the mountains. And so I only had a couple runs there in the mountains. But normally this would be a much higher value as I have more time going up hills. It's purely looking at how much time you're going up hills and how efficiently you go up those hills and how good at going up those hills you are from a running standpoint. But again, purely running. Okay, so now we've gone down some of the course bits. Let's talk about courses briefly here. So navigation of courses. You choose a given sport profile, running, hiking. It doesn't really matter. I'll choose hiking in this case. And I go down to navigate. And here is where I can open up saved courses. These are courses I've created on Strava, on Komoot, on Garmin Connect itself. In the case of Garmin Connect, that's totally free to create courses. It'll use basically heat map data, popularity, route data with millions of activities per day all fed into that. I can also explore nearby. This will look at the map nearby. I can create a course. I can do a round trip course where I can say, hey, I want to go 10 kilometers in any direction, and it's going to calculate 3 different courses based on what is popular nearby. It's a super cool feature. In my testing of this over many, many years in different Garmin devices, this does a really good job at just giving you a course that is probably popular in your particular area. It does take a few minutes to do this though, so do keep that in mind. Most of the time though, I am simply loading up, I'm just gonna go back here. I am simply loading up a saved course that I create. I create courses all the time, but I want to choose one with a little bit of elevation to kind of show you how this works. Here is Tour de Mont Blanc. So if I crack into more from there and I go down, I can see the climbs on it. So I can view each of the individual climbs, which will be used for Climb Pro. Climb Pro, one of my favorite Garmin features that'll automatically trigger as I'm going up a climb to show me how much time and distance to the top and the average gradient. You can see these are all the individual climbs on that. Going back here, I can also share this if I want to. Other people with Garmin watches that have the Garmin Share on it, which is most of the newest watches in the last few years have the new Garmin Share app that you can quickly share these back and forth. Or if I'm ready to go, I can also choose the course in reverse. But backing up here, I can just simply go do course, and now this will load the course up. Now, as I'm going along, I'll see the route on the map there, no problems. It'll give me turn-by-turn directions as I go. So say, hey, there's a turn coming up in 50 meters, turn left, turn right, etc. If I go off course, it'll basically tell me, hey, you're off course. Do you want to get back on course? And tell me how to get back immediately. Or it can also reroute as well back to the course at some other point up ahead. That's useful if there's a closure on the course, if the trail just simply is overgrown in this area, you need to take an alternate trail, etc. You can do that. The main advantage of having maps, though, is that you can see kind of more context around you. The Forerunner 970 has maps available for the entire world. They preloaded on your watch the maps for your particular region, but you can also download additional maps from the watch or on Garmin Express on your laptop, etc. I would recommend using your computer to download those maps to the watch. It is way faster. Just have a cable and plug it in, open up Garmin Express, tap the region you want to download to the watch, and that'll be done in my case, like 30 or so minutes to download was usually a 10 to 15 gigabyte file. Versus if you try to do it on Wi-Fi direct from this to your router, it will eventually get there, but it also might fail a bunch of times. So just a little bit of a pro tip there. So next up then, we've got contactless payments. So I'm gonna double tap this to turn this off. And then contactless payments, I'm gonna long hold the upper left-hand button right there, and I'm gonna go to the credit card option. Now, in this case, I've set this up with the Garmin Connect app ahead of time, and it requires that your bank support this. So not all Visa cards, all MasterCards, etc., but your particular bank. So in my case, I have a Chase card, so it's Chase as the bank, and that needs to be supported for that Visa card. Here in the Netherlands, I have a Dutch card with ING, so I can add that card in there, and so on down the list. Garmin's list of banks you can find on their site there. It continues to expand slowly but surely. If you're in the US, more than likely your credit card is covered. If you're outside the US, there's a strong chance it's covered in most of Europe, but you never really know. In any case, long hold right there, open up wallet. It's then going to ask me for my password. Secret. There we go. And then I've got it right there, good to go. I can just simply tap this on a reader, pay for that just like any other contactless card. Okay, so last up, let's look at the offline music capability. There's the ability to play music directly from the watch here. It has storage in there, so you can download music from Spotify and Amazon Music and YouTube Music and you name it, as well as just put MP3 files on there if you want to. So in this case, I'm going to go down to music here, all the way down this. And again, you can rearrange these as you see fit. Music, there we go. And I can add music. Now, in my situation, I've already paired up my Spotify account to it. So you'll have an option to choose Spotify there. I've done that already, and it links to my Spotify account. I can now choose to add music from this. So I can say playlist, for example, and here's a couple different ones right there. I'm gonna go down and find some, I'm just gonna go with best songs. There we go. Can't go wrong with best songs playlist. Now it's going to connect to the Wi-Fi network. Now I haven't set up a Wi-Fi network here in this location, so I'm going to go do that really quick. So the reason is it's going to use Wi-Fi. I'm going to go back to settings. There we go. And down to connectivity and to Wi-Fi. And I'm going to choose Wi-Fi My Networks and search for networks. And the cool part is you can actually use your phone to type in the Wi-Fi password. So I'm going to find one right there, the Cave Guest. Easy. And then in a second, it should ask me on my phone if I want to type that password as well. There we go. You can see it now shows. I can just type the password in real quick, and then it connects to it right away. As easy as that. Now, again, it uses the Wi-Fi to download that music because downloading music over Bluetooth would take forever. Now, it's still not super fast on Wi-Fi either, but it's not horrible. So now we'll go all the way back real quick to music. I'm going to choose the best songs of all time. Now it's going to look for Wi-Fi and start downloading. And you can see it's going to start right there, 0% complete. There's 400 songs in this. This would take a long time. If you were to plug it in though, one, that will help battery because this burns a lot of battery with Wi-Fi on there. Two, if you plug it in and put it next to your Wi-Fi router, perhaps you've got a little battery bank or something you can plug into, or even a lot of Wi-Fi routers have a USB port in the back. That'll help a lot. The signal strength here is not its best feature, so getting as close to your Wi-Fi access point as possible will really help. The other thing is when you just put this in to charge it, it'll synchronize and update that playlist. Most of these playlists from Spotify and other providers are dynamic, so they're always adding songs, removing songs, etc. And this will do this. In this case, it's got 1% complete, which should be about 4 songs, right? Because 400 smart songs. So I'm going to cancel it for right now. And that's all right, because I'll just have at least those 4 songs there. As you see right there, 8 songs, I guess, 1% roughly. And now I tap into this and it's going to say, and you can hear it right away starting to play from the speaker on the Forerunner 970. Now, I don't want to get like a copyright strike. And instead, I want to put it on a pair of headphones. So we're going to pair up those headphones. Just going to hold the middle left-hand button right there. And I'm going to choose audio output, add new, and I've got my handy dandy Reese's Pieces, or Reese, not Pieces, just Reese's headphones. Then I get these turned on into pairing mode. Okay, there we go, the Reese's BT headphones. We'll select to add those. I will now choose audio output as the Reese's. There we go, searching for this. There we go, okay, connected. And now I hit play, and yep, I can hear it. I can put it right next to this real quick, just so you can confirm it is playing. There you go. As simple as that, folks. You can have multiple headphones if you want to save in your profile there. Okay, there you go. A complete look at the Garmin Forerunner 970, how to use it from start to finish. If you got any questions, feel free to drop them down in the doohickey down there, and I'll try to get to them. Otherwise, go ahead and hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. With that, have a good one.